Okay, obviously, as of late, we've had a ton of dynasty values changing. I mean, you have someone like George Pickens balling out, skyrocketing up at dynasty draft boards. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to go to Twitter, say, hey, if y'all have made a trade this month, let me hear it so we can go through. We can look at some of the updated dynasty trade values of individual players. I can give you my input on them. But before we get into it, of course, if you want more Dynasty Fantasy Football content, all you got to do is go down there, drop a like on this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell next to the subscribe button. But I don't want to waste your time. Let's dive right in, and let's actually save this George Pickens trade until the end of the video. I mean, that's going to be the special one. But let's dive into our first one here, which is going to be a pretty large trade if you're just looking at the individual pieces in it. This is going to be a contending team that is trading away Tyreek Hill, so a contending asset, trading away DK Metcalf and their entire draft class. So a 2023 first, a 2023 second, and a 2023 third. And in return, they are getting Stefon Diggs, Mark Andrews, and Diontae Johnson. Now, I think from a talent perspective, maybe you want to make the argument that Metcalf's more talented than Diontae, yada, yada, yada. But what I would say is from a fantasy football perspective, it may not necessarily matter when DK Metcalf's going to be placed in to one of the worst situations in the NFL this upcoming season, playing in an offense that has the worst offensive line in the NFL with Geno Smith at quarterback. So you are getting an upgrade for this season from DK Metcalf to Diontae Johnson. And from a dynasty perspective, I would say that these are going to be players that are the same tier for me. So I want to say that the move from Metcalf to Diontae makes sense for a contending team, but in reality, it's a lateral move. If anything, we can take those two players out of the deal and we can look at it through the light of Tyreek Hill and a future draft class for Stefon Diggs and Diontae Johnson. And of course, Tyreek Hill has been more productive than Stefon Diggs over the past 3 seasons, but at the same time, you have Stefon Diggs getting into a better situation with no Emmanuel Sanders, no Cole Beasley. Tyreek Hill obviously going from Patrick Mahomes over to Tua Tagovailoa. In my opinion, I think that you're going to see a clear teardrop off from Diggs to Tyreek Hill. This is why if you look at my dynasty rankings, I do prefer Stefon Diggs almost regardless of if you're a contending roster or if you're a rebuilder, because they're both contending assets. You don't want either one of these guys on a rebuilding team, but it does make a lot of sense to move from Hill to Stefon Diggs, and then a contending roster. The price point's fair to be paying your entire draft class, to be bringing in Mark Andrews. So I really like this trade from a contending team, and I think it is a good example of how you can maybe slightly upgrade across the board and not necessarily have to just completely screw over your league mate. Now let's go over to our next trade. This is going to be almost a lateral move in my opinion. Here, you're going to be sending away Alvin Kamara and in return getting the combination of Leonard Fournette and a future second. I think we could sit here all day and we could make an argument going back and forth between Leonard Fournette and Alvin Kamara. I mean, right now, if you head over to Underdog Fantasy, which is what you should be probably looking at in terms of ADP to figure out actual upcoming season's projections, you have Alvin Kamara as a pick that usually goes off the board about 2 or 3 slots before Leonard Fournette, but they're almost in the exact same tier. So if you're going to be trading a player that's almost in that exact same tier and it's going to come down to your personal preference and you're going to be able to pick up a future second round pick, might as well do it. I mean, right now, I understand those second round picks, they don't necessarily seem like they're worth a whole lot, but this is probably the best time to be trading for them because those second round picks, you can then go ahead and flip them during the season for maybe an Alexander Madison if Dalvin Cook gets hurt and that team's a rebuilding roster and etc. But now going over to our next deal, I'm sorry to let you know this. I'm sorry to say this, but a member of the flock traded away their 104 and a future first for Saquon Barkley and Matt Breida. Now, I understand, yes, Saquon Barkley is a running back that a lot of people want to go out there and trade for because, of course, the upside case with the Saquon Barkley, if we look at the prospect profile that he is, I mean, if we look at the season that he had, either his rookie or second year, Saquon Barkley has an elite ceiling in 2022. But at the same time, if we are just talking about draft capital and how we can use that 104 pick, how we can use that 2023 during the course of the season to trade for almost exactly what we want, I know it doesn't seem like it now, guys. Trust me, I understand it. We are all in the redraft mentality. Y'all know I'm uploading every single day on that redraft channel. It doesn't seem like you were going to be able to go and trade that future first for someone like Saquon Barkley halfway through the season. But there are going to be opportunities where teams that thought they were going to be contending, that has someone like a Saquon Barkley or a Dalvin Cook or a Derrick Henry, all of a sudden they have some other injuries to their roster, maybe some players disappoint, and they're going to have to go on a fire sale with those objects. They're going to have to look at Derrick Henry and say, okay, I am ready to burn this down. I am ready to just pack it in and try to get the 101 in 2023. And you can then go and trade this 2023 first for Derrick Henry. You can hand choose the actual elite productive running back when they're producing during the season. So to pay this price point on a stud running back now, I don't exactly get. Now let's go over to our next trade. This is going to be another Leonard Fournette deal. This is going to be Leonard Fournette and Michael Gallup, and you're moving off of Miles Sanders, Alec Pierce in a future second. Now this, in my opinion, is a very good example of how to use those second-round picks. We just talked about someone going out there, moving from Leonard Fournette to Alvin Kamara in the same tier, or vice versa. They're the same guy, and picking up an additional second-round pick just for the hell of it. Yeah, then you can go through and you can look to take that second-round pick. You can look to package it with another player that isn't exactly in that same tier, and then you can get a clear upgrade. This is how we need to be using those second round picks to try to bring in additional value to our roster. Now, if you're having a hard time figuring out, okay, where should I be ranking in Alvin Kamara, Leonard Fournette? How do I figure out that these guys are in the same tier? How do I figure out that Miles Sanders and Leonard Fournette are in separate tiers? You can go to Keep Trade Cut. They'll have dynasty values there. If you're a contending team and you want to look at projections for this upcoming season, I would recommend going and pulling Underdog ADP, because Underdog is going to have probably the most amount of real money fantasy football drafts this entire season to pull from. But of course, when you're looking at their ADP, it's just going to be redraft leagues. So you want to be looking at that for this upcoming season's projections. And then you can maybe extrapolate what you expect with those long-term situations. And if we head over there to Underdog, you're going to see that Miles Sanders is like a late 7th round pick, early 8th round pick. And Leonard Fournette on the other end of the spectrum is going at the end of the 2nd round versus the beginning of the 3rd round. So it's a really easy way to go through and just see what the overall marketplace may be saying. And of course, if you want to draft on Underdog Fantasy, if you want to get in some real money fantasy football drafts with me, make sure you go sign up. Link in the description, link in the live chat. We draft there every single day in the live stream. And when you sign up for Underdog Fantasy and use promo code FLOCK, they will match your first deposit dollar for dollar up to 100. You'll get our 2022 fantasy football rankings, our dynasty rankings, our 2022 fantasy football draft guide, and you can have some fun draft with us. But let's move on to our next deal. And this one's going to be the pair of Green Bay Packers running backs. You have Aaron Jones and AJ Dillon, plus a future 2nd round pick, versus Ezekiel Elliott and Marquez Valdes-Scantling. I don't want to spend much time on this. This is going right back to pivoting off of those running backs, looking for players in the same deal, possibly picking up some extra value at the same time. I think there's going to be a crowd out here that wants Ezekiel Elliott, and then I think there's going to be another crowd that wants Aaron Jones if they're just individual players by themselves. So if we're looking at the fact that they're comparable in value, hell, just remove them from this deal and look at what it looks like. Then you're looking at AJ Dillon in the 2nd versus Marquez Valdes-Scantling, and of course, that's the easiest trade to ever determine. You're taking AJ Dillon in the 2nd round pick, and it's a no-brainer. Our next deal is another no-brainer. I wanted to grab some of these landslide trades just to throw them in here. We had Michael Pittman and the 305, so 305 just complete trash. The 312 also complete trash. And all you had to do is trade away Rashad Penny and Jacoby Myers. So maybe this tells you that from a dynasty perspective, you should be looking at a couple of those running backs that project to be starters this upcoming season, but have no long-term value at all. Just try to sell them. Of course, you're never going to get this return in any other league, but just to go through and highlight what's possible with selling a player that has a nice median projection coming into this upcoming season and actually getting a long-term dynasty cornerstone asset. Now, going to our next deal, we are going to be trading away Terry McLaurin, a future 2nd and a future 3rd, and we are going to be receiving 2 future 1st, a future 2nd, and 3rd. So we can remove the 2nds and 3rds from this deal, their equivalent, and we could be looking at Terry McLaurin or 2 future 1st-round picks. This goes right back to what we were saying earlier at the beginning of the video, where I understand it's the middle of August. This is redraft season. Everybody's looking at their teams and they're saying, how do I get production in this starting lineup? How do I contend right now? Please just be patient, guys. I promise you, these 1st-round picks, if you were to have these 2 first on your team during the season, the value's not going anywhere. You're going to be able to look at the entire landscape. You're going to be able to look at a few of those teams that are all of a sudden having to be in rebuild mode, and you can approach them and say, oh man, hey, I see that you are trying to get the 101. Do you mind if I ship you this 2023 first for DK Metcalf? And that's a deal that you are going to be able to get done during the season. It's almost a better idea to be selling your 2023 first when we get to September and October compared to selling them in August. August is the month of the veteran. This is when everybody's just thinking about fantasy football points and everybody thinks they're going to be a contender. But now going over to our next trade, this team decides to move off of Mike Evans, Juju Smith-Schuster, and I'm assuming $1 from the waiver wire for Stephon Diggs. This is the type of move if you're a contending roster. Because I know a lot of people say, okay, I'm a contender. Here's what I want to do. I need to go through and I need to trade for some wide receiver depth. I had this question on Locals the other day. Someone asked, okay, Mason, I have a great contending roster, but my wide receiver 4, wide receiver 5, it's a massive teardrop. Should I trade my future second round pick for Marquez Valdes-Scantling? And in reality, if you're a true contending roster, is Marquez Valdes-Scantling ever doing anything for you? If you were destined to win this upcoming season, if you were that true contender, is trading for Marquez Valdes-Scantling and giving up a second round pick making any difference whatsoever with that outcome? Probably not, if we're going to be completely honest. So if we are going to make that deal as a contending team, we need to be looking to move off some of this depth and actually trade for impact players that are going to hit our starting lineups, because what do contenders need to worry about? If you're a true contender, you need to be worried about weeks 15, 16, 17 in the fantasy football playoffs and not necessarily being able to put in a respectable flex when everybody's on bye in week 9. Now, going over to our next deal, this one is a Saquon Barkley trade that on the surface, it looks like it's the Saquon Barkley side, no question here. So we can just remove the second round picks. It's essentially Antonio Gibson and Devonta Smith versus Saquon Barkley. But I am slightly concerned about making any deals regarding Antonio Gibson right now, because I've talked about this on the redraft channel. You could see two very polarizing outcomes for Antonio Gibson. Like, he's almost the exact opposite of a David Montgomery. David Montgomery, you draft him, you know exactly what you're getting. It's not going to be that great, but it's not going to be that bad. Like, you know who David Montgomery is. With Antonio Gibson, you can tell yourself, oh, okay, well, this is a running back that has back-to-back top 20 finishes at the position, and it was his first and second year learning running back, an elite-level athlete. If he can put it together going into year 3, not many players have this upside. But at the same time, we can say, okay, this is a player that can't stop fumbling the ball. This is a team that decided to bring back J.D. McKissick, decided to draft Brian Robinson in the 3rd round. Maybe Antonio Gibson's in a touch squeeze, and he's not even startable going forward. And there's a very wide range of outcomes on Antonio Gibson. I love Devonta Smith in Dynasty. So even though I think Barkley's the way to go with this trade, sometimes even if you're making the right trade, 12 months from now, it can still end up looking like you made a horrendous deal. Because if Antonio Gibson does hit his ceiling, if Devonta Smith turns back into the wide receiver that he was in college, and somehow Jalen Hurts actually has passing volume here in Philadelphia, and Saquon Barkley gets hurt again, like, this is a deal that the value's on the Barkley side, but I just want to use it as a highlight and saying, you never know. You never know with the Dynasty trade. If I want to come out here and say, oh, what idiot would trade for Gibson and Devonta Smith? We could be looking like the idiot 12 months from now. Our next deal going to be Rashad Bateman versus Darnell Mooney. Here, trades like this, it doesn't matter if you're a contender, if you're a rebuilder, it's going to come down to you. I mean, if we look at underdog, Rashad Bateman's being drafted mid-round 5, Darnell Mooney late round 5. If I look at my Dynasty rankings, we have these guys in the same tier as well. So it's just going to be personal preference. I would say I am worried about both offenses, but from a Dynasty perspective, you can at least see how the Darnell Mooney situation gets better, because maybe they go through and they bring in a CJ Stroud. Maybe they bring in a Bryce Young this offseason. Whereas with Baltimore, the issue is not necessarily that the Baltimore Ravens don't want to be starting Lamar Jackson. It's just that the Baltimore Ravens want to be running the ball every chance they get, and they have Mark Andrews. So I don't know, maybe I lean Darnell Mooney, maybe I lean Bateman. I kind of go back and forth, but this is just an example of a trade that it just comes down to you. It's whatever you want. And our last deal here, I think this is the exciting trade. Someone sent George Pickens and a future second for J.K. Dobbins. Now, my initial thought was, oh, great trade. Great trade. And I had George Pickens ranked as a first-round pick in our 2022 Fantasy Football Draft Guide. I didn't like George Pickens when people were talking about him before the NFL Draft ahead of guys like Chris Olave. I mean, people were saying he was similar to a Treylon Burks. I was like, no, give me Olave, give me Burks, give me Jameson Williams. We had George Pickens right after that tier. But I like the idea of selling the hype. If we are going to sell Pickens, however, I think we can maybe squeeze a slightly more value out of him. Like if we're going to say you can get a 2023 first round pick for George Pickens, which at this point, I think you probably can. Would we rather have a future first and second or J.K. Dobbins? Assuming it's a super flex format with how valuable those 2023 picks are going to be, we probably prefer the first and second. So I think it's a good trade with the idea of it. But at this time, based on the George Pickens hype, you need to be asking for more. I think if we're trading like Pickens in a second, instead of getting J.K. Dobbins, maybe you try to go get a Javonte Williams, a Breece Hall. And I know that seems crazy, but guys, people are in love with George Pickens. I think there are a lot of people right now that have George Pickens as the wide receiver 2 in this draft class, only behind Drake London. Now, that's all I got for y'all. I really hope y'all enjoyed this video. I really hope you got something from it. If you did, please go down there, drop a like, subscribe to the channel, and let me know in the comment section if you want more Dynasty videos. But thank you again. I truly do appreciate you, and I hope we get to see you with the live stream tonight.